I would say poetry definitely chose me. And it chose me at a very young age. And for most of my life, I did my best to ignore it. and to and to find something else that I guess got me more of what I thought I needed at the time. Um, Looking back at my early adulthood, I can see now that a lot of what I was after, a lot of the way I structured my life was to attract the admiration of other people.
Mm,
And looking back now, I can recognize that um, what I probably really wanted or needed was love,
right.
but that might have been too scary or too vulnerable. And so admiration was sort of my stand-in for love. And so I think I did a lot of things that they were as true to myself as I knew how to be at the time.
Hmm.
But eventually the places where they didn't fit, um, those joints started to break down.
Hmm.
And it was only after that that poetry started to come back into my life. And then looking back, I could see how it was always kind of seeping up through the cracks and sort of trying to find its way to the light.
Mm,
Wow.
I love that.
Yeah. So at what point, because you've written a book now, we'll talk about in a second, and you've written
Yeah.
many essays that are beautiful. And I love the recordings that you did for the essays too.
Oh, thank you.
And so at what point would you say that you considered yourself like, oh, no, no, I'm a poet, like I am a writer, I'm doing this now? Whereas
That's a
before
good
it's like,
question.
could be these weird hats that we kind of try on of like, oh, I just wrote this thing that I was passionate about. And then as I read back 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh, that felt weird.
Yeah.
But there's that time where like that happens and you read it again and you're like, oh, wow, I really feel strongly about that. Like I'm so happy
Yeah.
about that thing that I just created.
You named that really well. Yeah. The way that it worked for me was as I was kind of coming out of that period where uh, things kind of broke down in my life. I just started to experiment with things. The question that I asked myself during that season was, what is it that I really love in the world?
Mm,
Not what I'm supposed to love or what I've been taught to love or what I've been rewarded for loving, but the way that I always phrased it for myself was, what do I love without reason or explanation? Just because I'm me.
I
Yeah.
want to sit with
Um,
that question for like days.
it took me months and I mean, still to this day, this question is one I live with, right?
Mm,
Um, and as I scratched away at the little inklings that came up through that question, um, poetry was one thing that just kept finding its way to the surface.
mm,
And around the same time, I proposed to my now wife, and we started planning our wedding. And so to honor that part of me, I thought, what if I write some poems to help carry the themes that we want in our wedding?
Mm-hmm.
mm.
And so I started walking to the local coffee shop um, almost every morning and just trying, just writing lines. I hadn't written poetry seriously since, it was an assignment in middle school.
Right. That's where my
Um,
son's at right now.
yeah. And so I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to start. I didn't know how to make progress. And so it took months and months, but I ended up with one poem and then a series, a kind of cycle of 4 poems that ended up being a really beautiful part of our wedding ceremony. And it was over that course of months and months of what became a practice, a poetry practice,
Mm,
that I finally found myself feeling like, oh, this is part of me. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
beautiful. How long ago did you guys get married?
It was 2019, so 6 years.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, we snuck it in before the whole COVID thing came
Right?
in.
Yeah. I met my now husband during COVID.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm curious about that start or like that reinitiation
Yeah.
and when you first started talking about that, my own relationship with poetry has also been off and on. And
Hmm.
about, I don't know, 7 years ago, I started writing like erotic poetry. And I even
Hmm.
created like like a secret Instagram where nobody knew who I was.
That's great.
And where this curiosity comes from is because of my own struggle. What is poetry like for you? No, I want to rephrase that question. Do you find that your ability to really tap into the way that you want to create your poetry and your creation and your expression is reliant on external influence?
Can you give me a little more of where that question's coming from for you?
Yeah, I do best when I have a muse. Like if there's
Hmm.
something in my life that's either really drawing me in, and I will
Hmm.
say through like eros or like love, prana, like this universal force of energy,
Yeah.
then it just can pour out of me. And sometimes it is
Yeah.
through a place of pain or conflict, which is what this last year any of my writings came usually from a place of pain.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering with you, I mean, you had this beautiful ceremony that was coming up, which is inspiring and motivating.
Yeah.
Is that a requirement for you in your
Hmm.
creative process?
Great question. Um, I think most of my work has been in response to what has happened in my life and the depths at which it has impacted me.
Hmm.
And my book, a lot of the poems in the book were written, 5 to 8, maybe 10 years after the events which sort of created the impetus for them.
Mm.
Mm.
And so it was this long process of it sort of, percolating in the depths where wasn't even trying to um, process anything poetically, but eventually what came up through poetry, or one of the expressions was through poetry.
Mm.
Um, so, and even the poems in the book were really, or in the poems I wrote for my wedding were really deeply informed by those events that had happened previously. And now my son just turned 15 months. And
Oh,
so,
cute.
15 months ago, this profound new thing happened. And in the expectation leading up to that, and in the wake of it, I find myself responding a little bit more in real time, but also with the sense that, man, I'm not going to know what any of this really means for a while, you know?
Yeah.
And I haven't had as much time to write poetry, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Um,
Less sleep, more diapers, more
yes,
dishes.
exactly. But yeah, so uh, I think having the goal of the wedding and having the goal of the book as well,
Mm.
um, helps to sort of mm, structure my practice a little bit more. But I think the where it was coming from was more of a slow growth for me.
Now we keep referencing the book. We'll say the book's title real quick because I'd love to talk to you
Oh,
about it.
sure. Yeah.
The wilderness that bears your name,
I've got my
and
copy right here. Yeah.
beautiful. Yes, and thank you for writing that. I mean, anybody that puts out some kind of creative thing, like thank you for doing that,
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And
thanks for
it's gonna
saying that. Yeah.
find an audience one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
But it just needs to be birthed, right? It needs to be put out there.
Yeah.
But so for you, what finally made you want to write the book? Was it like, oh, I've got this accumulation of work that I really am proud of and I really want to put out there, or was it
Yeah.
like, no, I'm going to write a book and now these things that I'm writing are going to go towards that book?
Yeah. Great question. It was the first option that you
Okay.
said. So when I started, I wrote the poems for my wedding, and then I happened to have this practice that I had created. I had never had a writing practice before. I'm bad at structure, so it wasn't something that came easily to me. But I was like, well, I've got the momentum. Why don't I just keep going to the coffee shop and see what happens? Um, incidentally, one of my favorite practices that I brought into that was bringing poems with me that I love by other people and copying them out by hand, as a way to start my practice, as a way to just get in when I got there in the morning. So if anybody is, writing poetry, maybe play with that. That's a fun one.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious about what poets you were choosing, but we can keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep
Well, we
going.
can talk more about that. Um, and so I kept going to the coffee shop and I kept writing. And came up, what bubbled up, um, were these reflections on really my experience of a season of what I think of now as like a profound autumn and winter season of life, and then what happened in the wake of that.
Mm.
And I didn't sit down thinking, okay, I need to write about the seasons of life. I just started writing these poems, and there's a poet named Mark Nepo, and I heard he was being interviewed on a podcast, and the interviewer asked, how do you distill so much wisdom down into such, a tight little poem? And he said, oh, no, it's the other way around. He said, the poem comes first, and then it becomes my teacher.
Wow.
And that's exactly how I feel about what happened with this book. Is the poetry came through and it taught me about the seasonality of my own life. And so then as I accumulated sort of a library of my own poetry, I started to see that arc, the seasonal arc, and the book is organized into seasons. And then when I found out that we were expecting my son, who became my son, I thought, okay, it's kind of now or never to actually put this into a book form. And so then I raced. So I raced to edit the poems and arrange them and, get them out into the world. But it was very much the poems in this book are about 5 years of slow writing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned the seasonality. Do you feel like the poems represent seasons of your life, or do you feel like you're writing during specific seasons more than others? Like, sometimes spring and summer, it's so nice. We're outside, season the day. Maybe not the best time to write, but when it's dark and gloomy outside, we come inside and we start, doing our creative stuff.
Yeah, that's a good question. The poems definitely are a reflection on my experience of sort of a longer arc of seasons. So I think of, there was a fall period in my life, which I wouldn't have called it that at the time. I didn't have that language, but it probably lasted 3 years-ish, maybe more. And then a winter. And then I had this really wild experience. Cause I had this really deep kind of profound winter season that I can look at like 9 months of like, wow, that I was in the depths. And then I kind of slowly started to come out of that. And what I thought would happen, what I hoped would happen was, oh, good, it's going to be spring. All my old energy, all my old enthusiasm, creativity will all come flooding back in the spring. And that just didn't happen at all. Instead, I just felt like I was like slogging through this really uncertain like time of life where I was moving. I wasn't in that depth of winter, but I didn't know, I didn't have any of the clarity of a spring. And it was only years after that I heard that in the northeast of the US, in like Vermont and Maine, they talk about a fifth season, and they call it the mud season. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's where I've been. I've been in the mud season of life. And I guess what happens, I haven't been there in the mud season, but I started reading about it. And I guess what happens is it warms up enough that the snows and the top layers of the earth start to thaw. But the deeper layers of earth are still frozen. And so all that snow melt has nowhere to go. It can't seep down into those deeper aquifers. And it just stays on the surface, and it turns everything into this thick sort of boot sucking mud.
I feel
And
like I can relate to
everywhere,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
everywhere you try to go, all the old paths that you're used to suddenly just feel like this slog, right?
Mm.
And so the mud season was kind of the recognition of that. It just landed as like, oh, this is where I've been. And there's that experience. I don't know if you guys have had this, but when you finally find a name for something, somehow it settles you.
Yeah.
It's relieving.
Yes.
Like, oh, the for me in that it's I'm not the only one, which is,
Yes.
definitely a chronic way of thinking. Anytime we ever think that we're the only one experiencing something, it's tragic. So like
Exactly.
when there's a name, we're like, oh, somebody else has had this before, or had, like there's, yeah, definition.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how it was for me is when I found the name, it just felt like it illuminated and clarified things.
Hmm.
And then I started sharing that with people slowly, just kind of here and there. And people had that experience of like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm in a mud season right now, or I was in a mud season.
Hmm.
And so then I got that experience of like, okay, this isn't just me,
Yeah.
I'm with other people in this. Um, and it was actually one of my readers, someone who had read what I had written about the mud season, who wrote in and said that I think they said that they were in a mud season that had lasted 8 or 9 years.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it was only that gave me the courage to look back at my own and be like, I would probably track it at about 7 years,
Yeah.
a 7 year long mud season. And so, and I share that just, for anybody who's listening who feels that sense of like, oh, I've just been slogging through for so long, just so that, people can feel like, well, you're not alone in that, we're together.
I would love to hear definition from your perspective. What are the symptoms, the qualities that would help people understand or relate to winter season, mud
Mm.
season? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because, yeah, like you use those words and I have my own interpretation. And so
Absolutely.
I'm just really curious, like, what did that actually look like, feel like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Let's see. So in my book, each section it's five seasons, the four that we know, and then the mud season is
Mm-hmm.
how the book is structured. And each one starts with what I think of as an invitation, the invitation of the season. And in winter, the invitation is to reconnect with the lost and wounded parts of ourselves that hold the seeds of a new spring. And I think that what that looked like for me, um, I think about what happens in the winter season, that the growth of the previous season has already fallen, but it's still covering things up.
Mm.
And so it has to sort of melt back into the earth. The identity that carried me through the previous seasons of life, the one that fall decided no longer fits and has to fall away, that identity has to compost.
Hmm.
And that is a very painful, or my experience of it is that it was a very painful and confusing process, because the things that I had always loved, the things that had always given me energy or sparked energy or joy, just suddenly had very little um, impact on me, or just I had so little attraction to things that I was used to being enlivened by. And instead I had to find connection to some deeper element of my own life that I don't think I'd ever been forced to connect with before.
Mm.
Um, in fact, one of my poems, would you mind if I read a
Oh,
poem?
please, please,
Yeah.
please. Go
Okay.
right ahead.
This was the first poem that I shared that um, that had this response back from the world that was like, oh, this is landing for people. This is people carried this into their own life and into their own experience in a way that I hadn't seen before. So this comes directly out of my own winter, and the poem is called Wintering. Now the leaves have fallen. The trees have pulled their aliveness back in from their branches, down into their fortress trunks and the dark subterranean closeness of their roots. Every year, they let go of exactly what everyone says is most beautiful about them to save their own lives. The time will come when you too have to drop all the ways you've made yourself worth loving and finally learn how to sit quietly right in the center of your own small life. Only there can you cry the tears your life depends on. Only there will you find the tiny seed that holds the whole mystery of you and cradle it in the warmth of your body until the spring.
That's beautiful.
Thanks for
Thank
making
you.
me cry.
Yeah. I feel emotion come up almost every time I read that. So I'm right there with you.
And that
Um,
one of those last lines you had where the
yeah.
entirety of you in a seed, right?
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful thing to remember, not just metaphorically, but an actual physical thing. Like, an acorn falls from a tree and that holds
Yeah.
the entire tree within it. It just
Yes.
needs to plant and have the right kind of nutrients and sun and the growth right, and then it can grow into
Yeah.
the biggest thing from this little bitty thing. And that's the same with us. Like, we're born with all this beautiful, like, genuine amazingness that is James Pearson, that is Abel Wild, that is Adam Real,
Yeah.
and it's like through the life that we live, we can nourish that and find all that beauty that's in that seed, because all of me started the smaller than my pinky, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, here
Absolutely.
we go. Like, that visualization is I think, an important thing for us to remember.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And one thing I relate it to is, have you encountered uh, internal family systems, Richard Schwartz's work?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I studied that for a bit as part of a coaching program,
Mm.
and uh, and that was long after this winter season. But looking back at it, it really helped to clarify sort of the task of the season for me, the task of reconnecting with those parts of ourselves that get cut off along the way, and that get sort of sidelined, that get wounded. And all they need is our warm, curious, compassionate presence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard because we layer over ourselves this we lay over ourselves the identity that we need to survive in the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's an author I really appreciate, Jerry Colonna, who breaks down human needs into love, safety, and belonging.
Mm.
And so I think that the first half of our lives, we just kind of try to figure out, how do we get ourselves the love, safety, and belonging we need. And there are kind of two ways. One is you can shape the world to give you what you want. And the other way is you can shape yourself to fit the way the world wants to give you what you need. And all of us have some mix of that, but the world is hard to shape.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so we end up doing a lot of shaping of ourselves into however it is we get some sort of viable mix of love, safety, and belonging. And we create this identity that we layer over the more tender, true parts of ourselves, because it works.
Mm.
It works, and we need it, and it's the best we can do at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the fall season of the book, I say that the invitation is to loosen your grip on the person you've needed to be in order to make space for the person you're becoming.
Yeah.
And so I think that the winter season, it's like that has fallen away. There's still this composting that needs to happen. And then there's this sort of deep vulnerability that is available in that season. Um, and if you move towards it, and if you have the wherewithal and the grace and the support to move towards it with that warmth and compassion and curiosity, then there's this deep self-connection that you can have. And that's what you carry forward with you into, that's what creates the conditions for spring in your life.
Yeah. All the
Yeah.
nutrients, all the trickling that comes from the melting down into the roots,
Yeah.
and creates a lot of healthy soil to grow upon.
Yes, exactly. And that, I think that's a really nice metaphor, because it implies, it acknowledges that that part of this is it just takes time.
Patience.
Yeah, that we can't, as much as we'd love to rush winter, we can't.
Right.
That rushing it would actually strip it of some of its core powers.
Welcome, love. If you're feeling the pull to remember your power, soften your body, and return to your truth, I invite you into my world of healing arts and transformational coaching. I'm Awa Wild, intuitive guide, energy medicine woman, and creator of Sensuous Revival Healing Arts. I help individuals and couples release old patterns, dissolve shame, reconnect with pleasure, and rise into a more liberated life. Through sacred pelvic healing, somatic practices, intuitive body talk, and emotional integration, you'll learn to listen to your body, trust your intuition, and create relationships that feel nourishing and aligned. Whether you work with me one-on-one, join a retreat, or step into my online program, you'll receive an experience of deep presence, compassionate guidance, and practices that create lasting change. If your soul is ready for more freedom, more pleasure, and deeper truth, I'm here. Learn more at sensuousrevival.com or reach out directly to begin your journey.
There's an interesting thing that that as a receiver of knowledge, right? So not the writer of, but like say reading poems, reading stories. You know, sometimes we have these emotions, we have these feelings, but we don't really know how to understand them, because as a person living the life, we don't have the context for it. Maybe we haven't.
Absolutely.
You know, and so one of the beautiful things about these, like the golden book stories, or like these allegoric stories that we have growing up, and these beautiful poems like yourself that have written, that gives us a frame of reference, right? And so like as we start going through life, you know, and we encounter that first, you know, let's say trial or maybe bully in our life, right? And then we think back into that lion and the mouse idea, you know, the story of the lion that's big and scary and this little mouse, but the lion just needs help taking the thorn out of its paw, right? So it's not really that big and scary if you just actually talk to the lion, right? And so these beautiful works of poetry and words and stories can give us these reference points that we don't even know we need.
Yeah.
So like as a reader, it's a beautiful, because like when I heard the mud season, like when you talked about the mud season, when I was reading up about your work, that landed so deeply with me, because I so experienced that. I just didn't have verbiage for it, right? There was no context for it, right? So the beauty of the receiver of something like that is like, aha moment. Thank you for putting context to the thing that I could not put my finger on.
Yeah.
But the one of my favorite quotes that I've heard as a writer or as a poet for yourself is one of the biggest adversaries of a poet or a writer are words. Right. I can look at a tree and just observe how beautiful that tree is. But if I had to tell you and explain it to you how beautiful that tree was, that could be thousands of pages. Right. You know, so how do you succinctly take this like beautiful thing or terrible thing and concise it down into some, you know, smaller body of work that's digestible. Right. And so like as the receiver, I love the work that somebody like you puts in, but I can only imagine how sometimes difficult it might be to actually, you know, pontificate about like the beauty of a season and make that tangible for a human being to understand.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that brings up for me is the number of times that I have just kind of shaken my head at the how limited our language is.
Right.
Just the like these gaps between words that we don't have anything to, nothing to
Especially
fill.
English.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and at the same time, I had a friend ask me one time, this was years back. Um, he asked, "How do you know when a poem is done?"
Mm,
And I'd never even thought about it before, kind of. It always had just been intuitive. But what came up in response was um, when whatever part of me was wanting to express itself feels itself mirrored on the page.
mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things about poetry is that oftentimes that mirroring requires a certain level of conciseness, for it to just have that landing experience, you know?
Mm.
And so I think that there's a real intuitive like desire, or I don't even know how to describe it. There like just a knowing that it needs to stay sharp and concise, um and that there's so many things I could go on about, but to go on about it would actually um would drain away some of its power.
I
Yeah.
also see that it creates a really vast space for the receiver to have their own relationship to it.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, if I produce something that is so detailed that it leaves no room for the other person's imagination, then I feel like I'm robbing them of the
Mm.
experience in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I don't want to say that completely because I've read very detailed writings and still had my own experience, but
Yeah.
I also live in my head a lot in imagination land. So
Yeah.
I, may have a little bit more, I don't know, freedom and experience and practice in that area.
Yeah.
I was looking at the clock and I have been like, wow, we've been really deep. I want to shift into some of the funny in the dirt.
Yeah.
Not to be too like Adam and I both talked about with this podcast, like we don't want to be so rigid where we're like, okay, now we've talked about deep. Now let's move into this. There's
Yeah.
still many seasons in your book, right, that we
Yeah.
haven't talked about. My excitement about doing this podcast is being able to talk to people and really get to know them. And
Mm-hmm.
like from my experience, and it's just simply mine, I know that's not the truth for everyone, but people like Alan Watts and even like Robin Williams, like these incredible artists and geniuses, they've all
Yeah.
experienced a tremendous amount of suffering.
Hmm.
I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more personally about your own story
Yeah.
and maybe invite in some of the comic relief that may have been hindsight, which Adam and I were both talking about this morning too. So I love that you're bringing that in the conversation where like some of the things that you're writing about happened 10 years ago. But
Yeah.
like where in this journey of creation has it taken you to your knees, to the depths, right? I imagine the
Yeah.
winter and the mud season maybe wasn't your most pleasurable.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
No, it was
So,
excruciating. Yeah.
yeah. So I'd love to hear more personally what that looked like for you.
Yeah. Okay. So, um, in my 20s, I ended up moving to East Africa, to the country of Uganda, to work with a nonprofit. And after a couple years with that organization, I ended up starting this little social enterprise, that I did with my family. And uh, it was, I put so much identity into that, so much of my own identity. I like merged my identity with this thing of like, well, now I'm a social entrepreneur.
Mm,
What a cool thing to be. And in my little circle of the world at that time of life, that was a very admirable thing to be.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I give myself grace now of looking back and recognizing like it's not that that was that it's not that that was false or wrong. It was just me shaping myself in a way to get my needs met. In this case, it was that need for admiration. which was kind of a stand-in for me of the need for love, I think, and belonging for that matter. And so I worked on this business, and um, about 3, 4 years in, the business started to falter. And uh, I tried everything I could think of to improve it, but the sales just sort of kept going down. And at the same time, I found myself slipping into what I can now look back on and say, oh, that's what anxiety and depression
Mm.
looks like and feels like. But I didn't have the language for that at the time. And I was terrified to let people see that,
Mm.
because that didn't match the persona that I'd created, the hopeful, inspiring, go-getter persona.
Mm.
And so I just suffered it alone for probably, a couple of years of just moving deeper and deeper into this. And finally, I got to a breaking point where I was like, I'm not going to survive if I don't make some sort of radical change. And so I spent a year preparing my business to be handed off, and preparing to move back to the States with no money, no place to live, no job, and at the deepest level of burnout that I've ever experienced.
Mm.
And luckily, some good friends of mine, they were living on a big property in the Oklahoma countryside.
Mm.
And they said, hey, you're welcome to just come crash with us for as long as you need. Um, and I remember, I think I even found an old email that I had written I was like, yeah, I'm going to take a month sabbatical, and, then I'll be, ready to rock again. And so I got to Oklahoma, and I happened to get there kind of right as the weather was shifting into fall. And I grew up in Southern California. I spent my 20s in equatorial East Africa. I hadn't experienced a lot of seasons before.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Little shock.
yeah, absolutely. And so I got to watch the seasons happen around me, um, as I sort of found myself just plunging to the bottom of this deep personal winter as well.
Mm.
And what I expected to be a 1 month sabbatical ended up being 9 months of just feeling completely lost, completely desperate. Um, and I remember being 3 months in to that time, not knowing how long it would be, and just recognizing I haven't figured anything out. I
Mm.
thought I would be launched by now, but I am just still at like the abs. And I remembered the feeling of despair, and this feeling of, okay, is this just me now? Is this just my life? Do I just not have energy or vision or um, any of that erotic impulse to go out and live? Is
Mm-hmm.
that just gone? And kind of around that time, I think I sent out almost like an SOS email to this guy that I had only met a couple of times, but he seemed older and wiser and more grounded than me. And I sent him this piece of writing that I had done that just sort of reflected where I was at. And he was just so kind and gracious and sent me back just some really nice emails, shared some poetry with me. And eventually I asked if he would help sort of mentor me through this time. And he came, I think we used Skype, and he Skyped into my little bedroom in the Oklahoma countryside, and um, just helped me figure out not what's the answer to the huge questions of this season, but what are the first steps that I can take? What are the first steps that will honor the directionality that my life is asking of me at this
Mm.
time? Um,
I
as
like it that
imperfect
way.
as they might be. Yeah. And so it was through sort of my friends who hosted me at their house and his generosity. It was through that support that I started taking steps out of that deep winter season and into what I didn't know was the waiting mud season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It's, sometimes we don't know how to process the thing until we're in it. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like we hear about these things. It's kind of like the idea of, like, let's say fame and fortune. Right.
Yeah.
These things that we hear about a lot, and we're like, oh, so and so, they can't handle that, but give me fame and fortune, I'll be able to handle that shit, right? I got
Yes.
this. I see the pitfalls, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And some of that could be in that anxiety, depression. I'll know when I get depressed. Like, I'll see it.
Yeah.
But what we don't see is that, like, let's say our baseline, and then we just fall 1 degree below that baseline, and we just
Yeah.
stay 1 degree, falling 1 degree, which doesn't seem like a lot. Like, there's just little
Yeah.
concessions that we make. Maybe we're sleeping in a little bit later. Maybe we're eating a little more junk food. Maybe we're drinking now where we didn't drink, But that 1% down, after a while, you look up and you're like, holy shit, how did I get this far down?
Yeah.
But, like, to your point you were making, like, sometimes we got to be at that point to realize, like, this is not where I want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I not that I'm better than this, but, like, I asked for help? Have
Yeah.
I tapped into my resources? When was the last time I went and saw the sun? Have I been pushing off a creative thing that's been drawing and gnawing at me that I just don't have the quote unquote time for? Right?
Yeah.
There's these opportunities for us to really kind of listen to our messages that are being told to us from our body, from external sources, to really be an active agent in the assisting of our getting out of our mud season.
Yeah.
Right. But in that part of it is, I think, such an important aspect to be an active agent in it and to know that you are strong enough to be part of it. You might not have all the answers, but, like, taking step 1 will show you where step 2 might be. But if you never take step 1, you're looking at step 57 and you're like,
Right.
how the hell do I get there?
Paralyzed.
That's terrifying, right? But just, like, take that one
Yes.
step. It's like the hero's journey. As soon as you take the step, all of a sudden, here comes Samwise. Here comes Gandalf, right? And all these people that are here to help you on your journey. But initially, you're like, how the hell am I supposed to take this ring all the way through Mordor and throw it? I'm a little hobbit. I got hairy feet. My feet are bigger than my head, right? It's like, what is this?
Yeah.
But we find our ways. So we find the verbiage, we find the help, we find the medium, whatever it is, to, like, maybe it's the kid that all of a sudden gets birthed into our lives and you're like, holy crap, there's
Yeah,
a
get
human
ready.
in front of me that I gotta, oh, cool, I gotta put my stuff together because there's a human that needs me now, right?
Yeah.
And we have that perspective sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was just having this conversation with, I'll just call her a friend, somebody I've met along the journey of my own healing. Sometimes it is time to rest, and sometimes it's time to fight. And it wasn't until, and when I mean fight, that's a big word that could be unpacked in a million different ways. But it wasn't until maybe like 4 years ago, I was working with a client and we just weren't, the needle wasn't moving, and that had not happened in my coaching experience yet. And I was feeling so beside myself. I just really couldn't figure out what it was that she needed and how I could, like, hold space for her to wake up to what it was. And it was like maybe a year later that I was studying another program and learning about the vagus nerve and the ways that we become dysregulated. And I've known, I've been working in the trauma space for 9 years now. And so I know a lot about fight, flight, freeze, fawn, friend, all the F's now that are getting spread out. But I hadn't learned, and I don't know this scientifically, but theoretically and philosophically, it makes so much sense to me in my body,
Yeah.
is that when we go into freeze, we have to work through the other aspects to come back to a space of homeostasis. So fight is typically the first response when we are believing in some way that we're in danger. When fight is not an option, then we freeze. No, excuse me, we run. When running is not an option, we freeze, right? And in the different books, you hear animal references. And we are animals, just in case we forgot. So once something is frozen, to be able to go back through the running and back through the fighting, to be able to come back to the place of peace. And that's where, we as humans, we learn about tapping and shaking and dancing and breath work and all of these things.
Yeah.
But I find that for a lot of people, and I would say especially men in our culture, you haven't been given space or permission to get angry and to know a healthy way of reaching your fight. And it's true for women as well, and anybody else who's on the gender spectrum. I see it in all places that I've worked with people. But for some of us who live in fight, we can, this is my personal story instead of using we terms. I moved away so deeply from my fight because I was known as this like destructive, angry woman. It started in my teen years. Actually, no, it started as a child. I was I was an angry child, an angry teenager, an angry young woman. And when I started
Well, at least consistent, right?
Yeah, right? I was predictable. That was good. But it was through my healing that I took on the messaging and the idea that that dynamic of me was not acceptable. And so there have been times where I've been in what, for me, winter usually reflects some form of an experience of depression. And it's oftentimes because it's a lack of movement. I'm not fighting against that heaviness for the thing in which I want to experience instead of. And I don't want to dismiss the richness of what I can gain from that dark space. And as a woman who cycles every 28 days, I get to experience it every month. I have a winter season, which is my bleeding time. And the beauty of learning and taking the time to intentionally slow down, and I want to emphasize the word intentionally, is a very different experience than being slowed down by life through burnout.
Yeah.
And so, I share this as a reminder to myself and to anybody who's listening. Like, if you're feeling stuck, meditation is not your answer. Maybe, I don't want to say it's not, but if you're meditating and you're feeling heavier and you're not gaining clarity and there's not an illumination of what that first step may actually be,
Yeah.
go to the kickboxing gym.
Yeah.
And if you can't move, if you're immobile for whatever reason, imagine yourself at the kickboxing gym. Allow your mind to serve you in that same way, because the body doesn't know any difference. So, yeah, just like, the feeling of being trapped is a very familiar experience for me.
I so relate to that. The story that's coming up for me is during that time when I was living in Uganda, and as I was sort of slipping into what I now know was a depression. I felt so tired, and I was like, oh, well, I need to rest. And so I kept like finding ways to rest, take a day off. I booked, a long weekend at this little eco lodge overlooking the river. And I would get back to my life after those rests, and I would be just as exhausted as when I left.
Yeah.
And then nothing seemed to work. And then it was, I think this only came in reflection, or in looking back. But some friends in Uganda invited me, or they decided, hey, we're going to run the Kampala marathon, like marathon in the capital city. And they're like, do you want to do it with us, to train and run the marathon? And I think almost out of peer pressure, I said yes,
Right.
And so I ended up
Divine
doing
intervention.
the full training cycle and then running this marathon. And one of my friends had a GPS watch, and the marathons are supposed to be 26.2 miles, which is already excruciatingly hard. And he clocked it at 28 miles. So it was just like an extra little bit. And the last bit of it was up this big hill
Of course.
to the finish line. And I remember those last miles, just, I mean, barely being able to move my body and like trying to run and not, having to go back to walking, and then finally finding just whatever last energy I had to actually run across the finish line. And I had, all these friends there because there was a group of us running. And I just walked away and I absolutely broke down.
Yeah.
Just complete like meltdown. No idea why.
Mm.
Like no clue what was going on. Um, but I think that it speaks to what you're saying, that there was so much in my body that needed to find a way to move out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it came out. And that was about the time, I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but that was about the time when I finally said, I need to change. I need to change my life. I need to move, all that.
Yeah.
And I don't think those two things are unrelated.
Mm. I love that.
What comes up to me with what you guys are sharing is this quote that I love, and I'm pretty sure it's Brene Brown that I heard it from.
Yeah.
But it's all emotions are okay, all behaviors are not. So when we can give
Beautiful.
ourselves the ability to feel the emotion, right? To let it
Yeah.
move with us, to let it move through us, whatever your process is, but not push it away. Like, I don't have time for grief right now.
Right.
Later, but we never delineate when later is. We just keep saying later.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden later is in the middle of Fred Meyer when you're trying to decide between like extra strong or extra soft toilet paper. And all of a sudden you're crying and I'm like, I need them both now. But when we give that breath for our emotions to just say what they need to say, right? There's a beautiful interview back in the day from the Dalai Lama talking about anxiety and how he used to first off, the Dalai Lama and anxiety. I'm like, well, that's, I didn't know that was a thing, right? I figured they figured that out, right?
Yeah.
But he would say, like, instead of, for the longest time, he'd push it away. He'd push
Yeah.
anxiety away. No, I don't want you. And then he said one time he invited it in. During his meditation, anxiety presented itself, and instead of pushing it away, he invited it in for tea. And he said, sit down. Let's have tea. Let's talk. And he heard the message of anxiety, the anxiety, whatever the message was. And it was like, hey, cool. Now that you've heard that, I'm going to be gone. Right. But if you don't take the time to hear the message, then all of a sudden anxiety is just like, but wait, I'm going to get louder now because you haven't heard the thing that I need to tell you about. Then all of a sudden you become anxious instead of having the anxiety. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a total difference between that dichotomy. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's like, Jason was talking about the IFS. It creates a system, from my understanding, which is fairly limited, but I do a lot of belief systems work, and that's very similar.
Yeah.
Is, can we just sit down and hear what it's asking of us? And I have a friend right now who's really struggling, going through some really intense health issues, and depression and anxiety are on the forefront.
Yeah.
And I asked her this morning, what is your anxiety doing for you? And at first her response was nothing. And then I didn't respond because I was busy getting ready. And then she responded and she said, I think it's trying to keep me safe. And so my invitation a lot of times with myself and with people, and I've had this conversation with my daughter last night. I was like, you can be upset. You don't get to be mean to me. And it's like, when we don't sit with these things, the behavior comes out sideways. And then we do end up getting that reflection validated back to us that this is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Whereas if I sit down with my anxiety and I recognize like, this is trying to keep me safe, then there's space to learn. Like you talked a lot about curiosity.
Yeah.
Like, what is it trying to keep me safe from? And is this necessary? And then for me, the invitation is always about, can I find gratitude for that thing? Because it was given to me for a reason, and it works really well when it has a job.
Yeah.
But if I don't give it a job, then, and I'm not mindful about it, then it usually can run itself rampant. But
Yeah, there's one of my teachers in IFS, Guthrie Cyan. He so part of the way that he trained us in IFS is you identify the part that's speaking, and you start in the body and say where, in or around your body do you feel it, and then you go to that part, you make sure there's no other parts that are, angry or scared about that. And you go to that part. And the first question that you ask the part is, how are you trying to help? And then you just sit and you wait for the answer to come.
yeah,
So yeah.
I love that.
And that's such a mind shift because, like it shows that like, I'm going to give you the opportunity to at least tell me that you're here to help me besides other than just like initially saying, get away. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't care if it's good or bad. My experience with you in the past has been negative. So we're just not going to go there. It's like, well, we need to explore that.
Yeah. Richard Schwartz's book is called No Bad Parts.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that.
Just every
Yeah.
every part is trying to do something good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we want to honor your time, and I know we're getting close to that hour mark. But so are there projects you're working on now? I'm sure that you've got tons of inspiration with the 15-month-old child.
Yeah.
All through life. There's a
Lots of
lot of
funny, dirty.
totally a lot of opportunities. Exactly.
Yeah, a lot more dirty than I've ever had, that's for sure.
Yeah, man. Changing diapers with the boys is definitely a challenge, man.
Woo!
Wow,
Yeah,
things get
definitely.
going.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's your next process? Are you working on any more work? Or are you just
Yeah.
dad in life right now? What's going on?
Man, thank you for that question. And first, let me just say it's just been a blast talking to you too.
Mm.
Thank you.
These conversations like this, I when I was working on my own values, conversation came up as a core value for me.
Mm.
Because I find that conversations like this give us the chance to hear ourselves say things that are longing to be said.
Mhm.
That's
I
beautiful.
think David White says that poetry is a chance to overhear yourself say something you didn't know you knew.
Mm.
And I find that to be very true of good conversation too. So thank you for inviting me into this. Thank you for what you're doing.
Wow.
Um, what am I up to now? Yeah, life. I mean, since my son was born, it has been a lot of. I have a full-time job and I do a lot of care of my son, and so that's been the biggest that's been the biggest chunks of time. And I'm writing some new poetry that I'm very excited about.
Mm.
I don't. There's one poem that I cannot read without breaking down in tears.
Wow.
Mm.
Um, I I don't know yet what to do with them because I don't have a full book yet. I just don't know like what I want to honor the poems themselves, as far as getting them out into the world. So I'm slowly working on that when I have a minute. My practice over the last year has actually been um, every week I write an email out to my little email list, and my wife has been very gracious to give me a chunk of hours every Saturday morning to go sit at the coffee shop and
Mm.
write, and she takes care of our son. Um, and it has become so that's been my primary writing practice, and it's become this really beautiful thing. So if people want to, every Sunday I send one of my poems and then kind of a mini essay, just like reflecting on what's happening in my life, the world, the themes of the poem, how they all sort of swirl together. And that's people seem to really enjoy it and resonate with it.
Mm.
So that's a great way to connect if people want to connect. And then slowly I'm starting to host. I love hosting events around the topics that I write about. So I hosted an event for fall called What Can't Be Kept,
Mm.
right around the autumnal equinox. And I'm hoping to host another one around the solstice in the winter as well. And then from there, I don't know. It's we're playing it by ear. There's this great I don't know if it's a great video, but my wife and I saw this video years ago. And you know those YouTube videos where someone just walks up to someone, like puts a microphone in their face and asks a question?
Yep.
It's one of those. And I think they're at like a music festival or something. And this guy put a microphone in the guy's face and says, "How many genders are there?" And the guy kind of looks around and says, "I don't know. I just got here."
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
And
brilliant.
like multiple times a week, my wife and I look at each other and just say, "I don't know. I just got here."
That's fantastic.
What a beautiful, yeah, reflection. I selfishly want to read the poem that brought me to you.
Yes.
Maybe we
Do
can
you want
use
to
it.
read it? Do you want me to read it? What sounds better to you?
It would be cool to hear it from your voice.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think marked it because I knew that was the one um, that had first sort of sparked your curiosity. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Um, this poem, so this poem comes really directly out of my experience of internal family systems
Mm.
and some of the work that I did around that. Um, with that sense that um, there is no part of us that will not respond to a warm, compassionate, curious presence.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I find that when I receive that, there are things that can happen in and for me that can't happen anywhere else.
Mm.
And when I'm able to offer that, I feel like it's a birthright gift that we give each other, that our culture doesn't have a lot of value and training in, but that it's something that the more that we can offer it to each other, the more we'll all get to grow together into what we're all longing to be.
Mm.
Wow.
So this poem is called How to Listen. I'm not asking you to come down here and clean out the muddy corners of my life. I'm asking you to be a forest where mud and leaves, shadows and light, growth and decay all have their unquestioned belonging. I'm asking you to be an ocean where even great storms don't trouble the depths, and each tear is welcomed as a homecoming. I'm asking you to be as spacious as the vast darkness behind the sky, which will never be afraid of what I do or don't choose. I'm not asking you to hold me together. I'm asking you to open so wide, there's room for all the ways I come apart.
Wow.
Every time I share that poem, I get comments from people saying things like, well, you're asking a lot.
But shouldn't we though? Shouldn't we
or
ask
like,
a lot?
or who are you asking? Who are you asking this to?
The universe.
And so yeah. So I think it's worth saying that the first person I ask this of is of myself for myself.
Yeah.
And B, I just want to name that I have found it hardest to offer this sort of presence to the people in my life who my life actually does depend somewhat on their decisions, like my wife. It's more challenging. Offering this sort of presence to someone who whatever they choose will never impact me. Oh, great. I got no skin in that game, you know?
Yeah.
So I just want to honor that what this poem is asking is actually profound and difficult, and deeply, deeply worthwhile to practice.
Thank you for listening. Remember to like or subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you're listening to. And if you found this episode helpful, please comment or share it with a friend. Check out the show notes for links to get in touch with myself, Awa, or our guest. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.